was ready to go to bed last night and see what President Trump tweets. He ruined everybody's life in 2-sentence tweet, but it's not as bad as everyone went crazy with last night. We're going to try to break it down as best as I know it at this very moment. Obviously everything's changed many, many times. He hasn't even really announced yet. Maybe during his, coronavirus, update, he'll talk more about it, but he hasn't actually signed an executive order. If anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, last night at around 11 p.m. or so, right when everybody was ready to get to bed, Donald Trump just wrote out a tweet. He said, oh yeah, and by the way, just feel like writing a tweet. By the way, no more immigration to America. End of story. And everyone's like, what? Huh? That's crazy. This morning, business groups went crazy. Immigration groups went crazy. Democrats went crazy on Trump, because really he's using this crisis that we have right now, this coronavirus crisis, to really change rules, because this is what he campaigned on 3.5 years ago. For the most part, as of right now, today, there's no immigration to America anyway. Planes are not flying, embassies are closed. So for all intents and purposes, Donald Trump's tweet last night was just inflammatory, just to inflame tensions. Because the reality is, on the ground, embassies are closed, immigration's closed till May 2nd. We have a ban from Europe, we have a ban from Canada, we have a ban from Mexico, we have a ban from China. Planes are not flying. They're all parked in the desert somewhere. So what he announced is already what is happening. What we believed was going to happen, certainly the immigration lawyers, is that once the coronavirus, we came back to the back end of the curve on the coronavirus, that they would open up travel from Europe. They would open up travel from Canada and Mexico, and I don't know about China, but certainly parts of the world that have reduced their coronavirus. And Donald Trump, because he thinks he's the king, he decides that I'm just going to stop immigration from everywhere. Now, he's not the king. We had a revolution from the British, 250 years ago, 240 years ago, whatever it was. So we don't get ruled by a king. The way we get ruled by, so you understand what Donald Trump can and can't do. The way we rule and the way we make laws in America is that Congress, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, passes a law. And they pass the law that says you can get married to a U.S. citizen and sponsor them, immediate relative. You, as a permanent resident, can sponsor your permanent resident spouse. You're in the F2A. You can, as a permanent resident, sponsor your unmarried children over 21 who, as a permanent resident, that's the F2B category, the F3, married children, and so on and so on. And the president's job is to run the Department of Homeland Security and enforce the laws that Congress has passed. Now, one of the laws that Congress has passed is that you are inadmissible to the United States of America under one of two scenarios. One scenario would be you are a health hazard to America. You have a communicable disease. And the second one is if you are coming to work with a job offer and you did not get sponsored in a job and prove that you're not taking a job away from an American worker. Those are two different processes that at this moment, Donald Trump in his tweet last night says, we're going to stop. We're going to stop all employment-based job sponsorships. We're going to stop all family sponsorships. And I presume, because he hasn't said how he's going to do it, let's talk about family-based first. I presume he's going to do it based on family-based, and he's going to say that every person, yeah, that's right, that face we just saw, oh my God, it makes me want to vomit, that every person who's coming into the United States of America has a communicable disease. And he's just now has made a blanket assumption that every human being who walks into America, gets on a plane to America, immigrates to America, has a communicable disease. Now, part of the process of getting a green card, which everybody knows, is you go to a medical doctor before you go to your interview. and you prove by taking a test at a medical doctor that you do not have a communicable disease. There are plenty of people who are immigrating to the United States who have coronavirus. There are also plenty of people who don't. And as far as I see it, as far as how Donald Trump can enforce the law, he can enforce the law and say people with coronavirus can't come to America. But he can't say, I'm going to presume that every human being has coronavirus and therefore there is no immigration, because that's what his tweet was last night. Now, about 15, 20 minutes ago, before I got on the air, the New York Times was reporting. The New York Times was reporting that he is going to make exceptions to his blanket, I'm going to stop immigration. What are those exceptions? Well, if you already have a visa, you'll be able to renew it. Which visas you can renew, I'm not sure. 2, if you are married to a U.S. citizen, or your children are U.S. citizens and sponsoring you, or you want to sponsor your children, your immediate relative, you will be able to continue those cases. If you're on an H-1B, you will be able to get an H-1B. You'll be able to renew your H-1B. If you're on an O, you'll be able to do that as well. All the work visas, all the non-immigrant work visas, all the people in the tech business, technology business will be able to renew their visas. That's what the New York Times is reporting, although we don't know what ultimately is going to be. What he is going to stop, based on what the New York Times is reporting, is for the next 120 days, he is going to stop the F2A category, the F2B category, the F3 category, the F4 category, and all the employment-based categories, which would be your EB1s, your EB2s, your EB3s, your religious workers, and perhaps even your investor visas. That's what the New York Times is reporting. We don't know, but assuming it's going to be something like that, 2 things. Number 1, right now it's only 120 days. Number 2, if the basis in which Donald Trump is deciding to end immigration for certain categories, but not end it for others, he can't change the law. He can only enforce the law. Remember that. So we have to, how is he enforce the law that says these people in these categories have coronavirus? So I'm going to say all of these people can't come to America. But if you're married to a U.S. citizen, or you're the child of a U.S. citizen, you don't have coronavirus. You can come. How is that even fair? It's not. It's not. That's what's called an abuse of power. And my opinion, what do I know? I'm just Uncle Brad, the immigration lawyer, but I think I know a lot. My opinion is that when this executive order comes down, and it's something like what is being described in the New York Times, he's already shown how he's discriminating against certain groups versus other groups without having a rational basis for it. So my guess is that when this does come out, and maybe it's coming out as we speak now, I don't know, but when it does come out, there will be a lawsuit, there will be an injunction, and we'll be back to where we are right now. Now, if the executive order is simply for 120 days, by the time they get to a court, it'll all be over anyway. So nothing would happen. If this executive order is not temporary and it's a longer period of time, then I think it's even going to be harder for Donald Trump to justify what he's doing. Think about it. If he says, I'm going to make a temporary order for 120 days, somebody's going to go to court and sue him. By the time the judge decides this, we're 120 days already. So I think right now, this is all a political ploy by Donald Trump to enrage his base, his right-wing base of people, to let them know that he's doing things racist, anti-immigrant, anti-minority. He's doing these things so he can get those people to come out and vote for him. Because right now, those people are very angry at Donald Trump for closing down the economy. We saw them protesting this past weekend on the steps in Michigan. We saw them not social distancing. And what we saw Donald Trump do right after right after he had a press conference with all his health officials, Fauci and Bricks and I don't know, whoever else is there, the Surgeon General, whatever his name is, I forgot. Social distance. We're not done yet. We got to open up the economy. We'll open it up when science tells us to open it up. And then 2 hours later, he's tweeting, you know, people have cabin fever, go protest, let's open up this economy. He was basically telling people it's okay to go protest, and not social distance because he was losing his base. And he needs his base to be reelected. Other than that, he has nothing going for him because he only has about 35% of the country who support him. So his goal is to make sure people don't go out and vote, but his 35% of the people who are rabid Trump supporters do go out to vote. That's how we won the election last time. So I think it's all political. He's playing with people's lives. And I think, for lack of a better word, completely messed up. With that said, I'm going to say a little more about it in a little bit. But the most important thing that everyone has to take from this is if it is in fact a short-term thing, there will be a lawsuit. It'll be over before the judge decides on it. If it's a longer-term thing, he makes the lawsuit against him more difficult to defend. And ultimately, it is apparent that if you're trying to protect the American public from coronavirus, you can't pick and choose which categories of people are allowed into America and which don't. Are you telling me H-1B people don't have coronavirus, but F4 brothers and sisters do? Well, now COVID, they've infected more than 2.5 million people. They've killed 174,000 people, this virus, worldwide. It has decimated the world. It has put us upside down in a matter of weeks. Now, Governor Andrew Cuomo here in our home state, Spar and Bernstein, Bradshaw Live home state of New York, our governor reported another 481 coronavirus-related deaths in New York today, with 29 of those in nursing homes. It was the lowest single-day toll in 2 weeks. The total number of deaths statewide is now over 14,340, but well below the 100,000 that we thought was going to be even a month ago. Now, Cuomo reported that statewide hospitalizations are relatively flat. ICU hospitalizations are down. And he said in a press conference earlier today that the current question now is, assuming we are seeing a descent off the plateau, the question is, how long is this descent and how steep this descent? That's what we are trying to figure out. The number of people in the hospital had also dropped for 6 straight days. Now, Cuomo is now talking about opening up parts of New York. I assume the parts that he's going to open up first will not include New York City, Westchester, Rockland, or Erie, or Long Island, the hard-hit counties. They're going to open up, northern New York first. They're also going to start allowing elective surgeries in northern New York, but not in the downstate hospitals, not as of yet. He was going to meet with Donald Trump at the White House. I don't know if that meeting happened or not yet. And the agenda for that meeting is testing. Donald Trump is saying it's up to the state to test. Each state has to do their own testing. And Cuomo says, we'll do our own testing, but we need the federal government to assist with the international supply chain. That states cannot get materials and they cannot get supplies from other countries without the help of the federal government. That's where Trump needs to step up his game, not with the stupid immigration tweets. That's where he needs to step up his game. Because once we're able to test on a wide scale, and I hope that day is coming in weeks and not months, I really do. Once we're able to test on a wide scale, we're going to know 2 things. 1, who's sick with coronavirus? If you're sick, you stay home. 2, who already had coronavirus? If you already had it, the presumption is you can't get it again for at least a few months, or maybe a year, maybe longer. Meanwhile, some of the responses to Trump's tweet last night, one came from Representative Joaquin Castro. And he tweeted back after Trump said, I'm going to end the immigration thing. This action is not only an attempt to divert attention away from Trump's failure to stop the spread of the coronavirus and save lives, but it's an authoritarian-like move to take advantage of a crisis and advance his anti-immigrant agenda. We must come together to reject his division, which is exactly what I said at the top of the show. Representative Jerry Nadler tweeted, President Trump now seeks to distract us from his fumbled COVID-19 response by trying to put the blame on immigrants. The truth is many immigrants are on our front lines protecting us as doctors, nurses, health aides, farm workers, and restaurant workers. I don't know if so much that he's trying to put the blame on immigrants, but what he is trying to do is just be a racist and stop immigration from coming and using this coronavirus crisis as a reason to stop immigration. It won't happen. It can't happen. Trust me. But you need really good lawyers. In an ironic twist with all this going on, today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. In Hebrew, Holocaust Remembrance Day is called Yom HaShoah. The internationally recognized date for Holocaust Remembrance Day corresponds to the 27th day of Nisan on the Hebrew calendar. It marks the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was the 1943 act of Jewish resistance in the Warsaw Ghetto when the Germans came to deport them to the concentration camps. And in that uprising, which lasted about 2 weeks, more than 13,000 Jews died in revolt. They didn't even make it out of the ghetto. I mean, it was a basic war between Germans with rifles and military equipment and Jews who had rocks and fists. Be that as it may, what is a perfect example of why America needs to be a shining light of liberty and justice and tolerance and immigration is that my great-grandparents immigrated from Poland some point in time in the early 1900s. Had they not immigrated, they would have been maybe in the Warsaw Ghetto. Maybe they would have been somewhere in Poland, but wherever they were in Poland, if they stayed and didn't immigrate, I wouldn't be here today. I would never have even been born. In New York, this is some good news for immigrants. Regardless of your immigration status, you are now included in citywide COVID-19 response and relief efforts. Mayor Bill de Blasio announced a $20 million fund that will assist 20,000 immigrant workers and their families with direct one-time emergency relief. Last week, stimulus checks from the federal government were sent out to U.S. citizens. This does not account for the 7.6 million Americans who are undocumented or the 4.3 million of whom pay taxes using a taxpayer identification number. So Mayor de Blasio teamed up with billionaire George Soros, whose organization Open Society Foundations. They're going to be funding this $20 million relief aid. So the aid is being given out by New York City, but it's not being funded by the New York City taxpayer. It's being funded by billionaire George Soros. The mayor's office of, and by the way, George Soros is a survivor of the Holocaust. The mayor's office of immigrant affairs and the mayor's fund to advance New York City will be creating a network of community-based organizations that will provide relief to families. So this is how it's going to work. If you're undocumented or you pay taxes with a taxpayer ID, you're getting $400 individual, $800 for a couple, $1,000 for a family with multiple adults and children. According to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, there are over 127,000 undocumented immigrants just in Brooklyn alone, which is why I seem to be extraordinarily busy these days. Now, Schumer claims he reached a deal on major parts of a $500 billion virus aid relief bill. He announced the agreement this morning, and Trump tweeted his support hours later. He wrote, I urge the Senate and House to pass the Paycheck Protection Program. It's going to fund more money for small business. Most of the $300 billion is going to small business payroll, but an additional $75 billion would be given to hospitals. $25 billion would be spent to boost testing for the virus. The U.S. is monitoring intelligence that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is gravely ill. His last appearance in the North Korean media was on April 11th. April 15th, North Korea's most important holiday, the anniversary of the birth of the country's founding father, came and went without any official mention of his movement. Do you think he has coronavirus? I don't know. But that's weird that on their biggest day of the year, this is like their Christmas, their New Year's Day, the biggest day of the year, guy disappears. Now, the Daily NK, an online-based newspaper in South Korea that focuses on North Korea, reported that Kim reportedly received a cardiovascular system procedure on April 12th because of excessive smoking, obesity, and overwork, and is now receiving treatment in a countryside villa. That also makes sense. He's a big fat guy who has absolutely no control over what he eats, and he smokes and probably doesn't work out in any way, shape, or form.
Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.